Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we have some ghost stories just waiting for us. And before we start the video, I'd like to request something to you guys. I'm thinking of doing another poop stories video. I know they're always received rather well and humorously. So if you have a story of something awfully embarrassing or horrifying that you'd like to share in this category, feel free to email me now or after the video, as I am looking for these stories. But with that being said, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I work as a manager in an adult novelty store with a theatre, so please envision the kind of customers I get. I had this regular who was nice enough, and we always exchanged pleasantries and small talk. One day we said goodbye, and as he went to leave he stopped dead in his tracks and came back to the counter. He told me that he ignores it every time, but today it wouldn't let him. Naturally, I ask him what he's talking about, and he proceeds to tell me that there is an older black man who is with me 24/7. He sees him every time I'm in the store. The older man just stands next to me, watching me and smiling. At that point, a chill ran up my spine, because no one in that store knows, besides my boss, that I'm half black, and that my 65-year-old black father that I was so close to passed in 2014. I said the usual, "Wow, oh my god," so I wouldn't give anything away to see what else he said, to see if it's legit. The customer proceeds to tell me that the man, my father, is sad about his kids not doing what he asked them to do, and one child in particular has greatly disappointed him. The man, my father, also wants the customer to tell me how much he loves his wife, even though she's married again. At this point I have tears in my eyes now, because how would this man know there's conflict between me and my siblings because of my father's death? How would this man know my mother is married again? He kept mentioning that he could feel a strong religious pull with my father. My father was a preacher. He told me a bunch of other things and asked if I was pregnant. I told him no, but apparently my next child will have my father's soul according to him. My 2-year-old son looks like my father and loves his favorite songs. I never saw the man again after that. When my brother and I were much younger, we'd have to stay at my grandparents' when my mum and dad went on vacation. This happened a lot, as my dad's company would allow my mum to go with him on business trips. There was only ever one guest bedroom in my grandparents' room, so my brother and I had to share a double bed. My brother always fought with me about who had to sleep near the edge of the bed, as the other side was against a wall. I always lost and would settle in for a sleepless night. The only way I can describe it is every night, an hour after I got to bed, someone would sit down next to me. It never made me feel threatened, but it was always creepy to be hummed songs and have my hair moved. One night I had enough of it and had to get out of the room. As I walked out into the living room, I saw my grandfather sitting in his favorite chair. He looked up at me and asked if Ben and June had awoken me. I quickly asked who Ben was and what he was talking about. His story quickly unfolded. During his first marriage, he had a son who would have been 23 and engaged. Him and his fiancée came to visit one night and slept in the room. They left late that night after arguing profusely. My grandfather overheard that June was pregnant and didn't want to scare Ben. On the way home, they were hit by a drunk driver and both passed away. I went back to sleep, leaving my grandfather muttering for a good hour or more out in the living room. Sometime after he went to sleep, and I felt the familiar presence sit on the side of the bed with me. To be clear, my brother and I fought about it because he felt the same thing, and we never wanted to sleep on that side of the bed. He always assumed I never noticed it. I would like to share a story. In Croxley near Watford, Hertfordshire in the UK, there's a moorland with a river running along it. Halfway down the moor walking west, the river juts to the right, northwest, and the bank rises up a metre or so. On a hot, bright summer day, I was walking along towards the raised bank of the river. As I got to the peak, I looked into the river, and there was a man in there. He was big, 6'4" if anything, long-bearded and quite fat. In the water up to his waist and apparently naked. He looked at me with shock on his face, as if I had startled him, or he hadn't expected to be caught having a dip. So as to not embarrass him, and because I was unconcerned, I waved a hand casually and kept walking along the bank. I intended to look away, and kept looking away, allowing him to salvage his modesty. But the river turns up the bank, and so I had to turn, no more than 3 paces on, and it was clear from peripherals that he had gone. I was standing on a high bank, slightly elevated over the surrounding land. I can see both ways along the river for over 100 meters, and he's just vanished. There was nowhere he could have gone. He wasn't underwater either. It's barely waist deep, and slowly moving and clear. He never even left a ripple in the water. It took me several minutes to accept he hadn't been real, despite seeing him for no more than 3 meters away, in bright sunlight. I didn't realize he was a ghost until he vanished, and that made him the oddest ghost I had ever seen. I saw my grandmother's ghost. I was 6 years old. We lived in upstate New York, just outside of New York City. Grandma Catherine lived in Chester County, and I have zero memory of her aside from this. One night, I woke at about 4 in the morning, walked into my parents' bedroom and sat in the leather-winged chair my father sat in when he read. Across the room was my father's closet. The door opened, and Grandma Catherine walked to me about 6 feet in front of me, smiled, sort of bent from the waist and said, "I just wanted to say goodbye." Then she turned, went back into the closet, before closing the door behind her, and I went back to bed. About 2 hours later, the phone rang. 10 minutes after that, my mother came into my bedroom to tell me that Grandma Catherine had passed away. "I know," I said. "What?" my mother asked, gasped, and I told her my story. She made me retell it 2 or 3 times, then gripped me on the shoulder hard and made me swear on my eternal soul that I would never tell my father the story. Freaked the hell out as only a 6-year-old can be, I agreed. I never told him the story either. He lived another 15 years and never heard it. By the way, I don't believe in ghosts, but I know that I saw my grandmother's one. How Aristotelian is that? 2 months after my mum passed, my dad sort of disappeared, and I was home alone a lot of the time. So my little cousin would stay over with me a lot of the time, because he was having family issues too. One night we were gaming really hard and got hungry, and so we went into the kitchen to get some food. As I walked out of my room, we just see literally every single cabinet door, drawer, the dishwasher, and a fridge all opened, and naturally I was extremely terrified. So my cousin and I ran back into my room. This isn't a big place, it's just an apartment, because we didn't know what to do. It did not look like anyone got into our place. My cousin was extremely afraid of ghosts, and I was petrified because I thought I was haunted, and I didn't know what to do. so I ran out and turned off all the lights, as electricity bills were expensive for my 15-year-old self at the time, and pretended like nothing ever happened. And the creepiest thing happened after that. My cousin and I saw 2 feet in the darkness of the hallway away from the room in the kitchen. We never slept with the lights off in that apartment again. I now live with slight paranoia that something is always around me, and it bothers me a lot because I sometimes feel like I'm just crazy, and other times will get this sense of dread and tell myself to let it pass. And I would like to tell some of my friends and family the story, but they always say that I'm just imagining it. But why would I ever make it up? When I was in college, a good friend of mine, John, lived in an apartment above a funeral home. A small group of us frequently gathered at his place because a lot of us lived with our parents, as it was a commuter school. We knew where the spare key was and frequently let ourselves in. One cloudy November afternoon, I got out of class early at about 4:30 and let myself in. I was pretty sure one of his roommates was home, so I shouted up, "Hey Ben, it's me." There was no response, but that was typical. Nevertheless, I just knew there was someone else home. I sat down at the dining room table and started doing some homework. Suddenly I looked up and saw someone sitting in the rocking chair by the living room window. At this point it's closer to 5 p.m. and there's very little light left in the apartment. I didn't turn the lights on when I got in because at that time it was still light, so I'm squinting in the other room saying, "Hey Ben, what are you doing just sitting there?" I sort of sensed the figure turned to look at me, and the figure just slowly faded. I wasn't sure I'd even seen it, but I felt totally creeped out. I ran up the stairs to his roommate's bedroom, knocked, but no one was home. But then Ben and John came up the stairs into the apartment. I'm standing wide-eyed in the middle of the living room and they're just like, "What the hell, dude?" I tell them I'm pretty sure there was a ghost in there, and they're like, "Oh, is that all? Yeah, we get that all the time." At first it was creepy, but now it's just whatever. And they went around their business. I totally thought they were messing with me for years. But a couple of years ago I ran into John and brought up the story. He said he didn't remember the episode with me that day, but that yeah, they used to see weird stuff in that apartment all the time. I lived in an old house as a kid until I was 8. It's like 110 years old now. My parents told me the ghosts started appearing after I was born. My crib was in their bedroom, and my mom would wake up to hear me giggling and cooing like I was playing with someone. Other times I'd be sound asleep, but my crib would be rocking back and forth. And on 3 separate occasions, she says she saw a woman in a nice white dress standing over my crib. My dad frequently saw her going up and down our spiral staircase that leads to the upstairs rooms, or just standing at the top of them near the balcony looking down at him while he watched TV. When I asked my sister about it, she was reluctant to talk about it but said she'd seen her. We also heard footsteps in the attic that would stop the second a light was turned on. My dad investigated a few times but never found anything, except sometimes the attic light was on when he was absolutely positive it was off when he went to sleep, as you could see the light from under the doorway. I only remember seeing her once, but that's a story for another time. I just sort of chalked it up as something weird my whole family experienced and never really thought about it much after we moved. None of us ever got a bad vibe from her, and she wasn't scary, so we just lived with it for 8 years. Fast forward to me being a freshman in high school. I'm in earth science class, talking to a girl I thought was cute. It got to the "so where do you live around?" part of the conversation, and she said, "In the old town near the railroad tracks." Oh, really? That's neat. I used to live there, on Elm Street. Really? That's where I live. The white one with the green shutters. No way. I'm kind of amazed at this point. With the plum tree out front and the white picket fence with the shed in the backyard? She nods. Then I ask, have you seen her? I kid you not, her response sent a chill down my spine and immediately gave me goosebumps. The lady in the white dress? Yeah. I was floored. I kept thinking, it's like a double-blind study. There's no way she could have known what I meant, and she gave me an accurate description when I didn't even say the word ghost or anything. I didn't know what a double-blind study was in the 9th grade, but you get the picture. Honestly, it changed me. I went from being sort of a jock kid who wore Abercrombie and American Eagle, when it was cool, to listening to Black Sabbath and Pink Floyd. My whole attitude on life changed. I became a lot more relaxed and was open to new ideas, whereas before I had this is what's real and this is what isn't idea firmly in my head. I met my first boyfriend when we were both 17, and in our last year of high school. His dad had passed away when he was 15 from lung cancer, and he was having a hard time with it. His living circumstances at the time were also pretty dismal, but that's another story. My ex smoked cigarettes, which his dad was really against before he passed, but he did it anyway. His pack of smokes would disappear almost daily and appear in the most random places, under the fitted bed sheets, in between the mattress and box spring, buried in a basket of clean laundry. One night we were laying in bed and his headboard had a ledge to it that he kept his smokes and drinks on. I was laying down looking straight up at it as he sat to grab them, and they flew off the headboard. I saw them twist a bit and then just get tossed. We were both stunned for a minute before we both agreed we had seen the same thing, but it still took us a half an hour to find the pack, because it didn't fly across the room but instead ended up underneath the bed quite a ways in. We weren't close to the wall, so they didn't ricochet. One night I was on my side of the bed, looking at the wall, and a clear shadow of a man appeared in front of me. Thinking it was my ex, I started talking and joking around, but he didn't answer, so I looked over my shoulder. No one there. I looked back at the wall and the shadow was still there. It lingered and walked away before my ex came back into the room. That happened occasionally. I always thought it was just him checking in and seeing what I was like, and if he was happy. Finally, we had a pretty rough breakup. He had a lot of demons. He cheated and became abusive. It was bad. He left pretty quickly, as we lived with my family and he was unstable. But he left behind most of his things, including his father's ashes, his vinyl collection, magazines and guitars, etc. It was all he had left of his dad, and I refused to throw them out, so I kept them in my bedroom closet, even though it took him nearly a year to finally come round and get them. The night that everything got picked up, I heard my closet door rattle and things move around the perimeter of the room. My lamp on the nightstand flickered on and off. It was his dad's lamp. He let me keep it because I used it for my crafts, and my cup of water rocked back and forth. I said, "Good night, Mr. Johnson, and take care of Danny for me." A few moments later, my bedroom door rattled, and that was that. He was a pretty chill ghost. He did smoke a lot of hash in life, so that might have helped. My uncle and I were super close, and I was 9 when he passed from cancer. When I was a kid, there was, and still occasionally is, a ghost or some kind of thing in my house that hangs around my parents' bedroom and detached bathroom. The bedroom is the older part of the house. We built a second story and occasionally my room. When I was alone upstairs, it would turn off the lights in whichever room I was in, and turn them back on if I left that room. But turn off whatever room I was in, it would walk directly behind me with these heavy, thunderous footsteps, breathing down my neck, whisper this fast, creepy-sounding gibberish in my ear, and throw stuff off my shelves. The few times I actually saw this thing, it looked to be the silhouette of a tall, skinny guy, not muscular, but not chubby, and it would only mess with me, no one else. I used to tell my uncle about this guy and how much it would scare me, and he would reassure me that I was going to be okay, and that he would always do whatever he could to protect me. After he passed, most of the ghost's antics stopped, and it would occasionally try, but I wasn't as scared anymore. And I've seen my uncle's silhouette walk through the living room, and he'd tap my shoulder when he'd pass me. One time when I was crying, I felt his hand rubbing my back trying to comfort me. He still hangs around sometimes. I love him still. It's nice to know, even now, that he still cares and watches over me. This happened several years ago, over 5 but not quite 10. I have numerous health conditions, so at the time I was a homemaker, and my husband worked during the day. I was taking a daytime nap one day, always keeping my bedroom door shut and locked while sleeping when my husband was at work. I had 4 dogs at the time, all chihuahuas that slept with me. I was sleeping peacefully for a few hours until suddenly, I heard a very loud and almost aggressive pounding on my bedroom door. Although this was unlike my husband to do, I looked at the clock thinking maybe I was sleeping so heavily he had gotten home from work and was trying to get my attention to open the locked bedroom door. When I looked at the clock, he wasn't due to be home for a few more hours, and my husband would have been saying my name repeatedly to get my attention. I was startled by the pounding, as it was very loud and, as previously mentioned, seemed almost aggressive in nature. I immediately jumped out of bed, stared at the door not knowing what to do at first, since I thought someone had broken in. Then, what happened next was so extremely bizarre that even I can't keep from laughing when I tell this story to others. As bizarre as this may sound, the remote control from our living room was then seen being shoved underneath the crack of our door in between the carpet and the bottom of the door. Keep in mind I was abruptly woken up, so I thought, can I be imagining this? But this was not to be, considering not 1, not 2, not 3, but all 4 of my dogs were not only barking hysterically at the pounding itself, but they were on the bed staring down at the exact part of the floor where the remote was being shoved underneath it, with their hairs on their backs standing straight on end. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911, thinking someone had broken in, and quietly told them what was going on. The dispatcher had me stay on the line with her until police arrived at the house. She informed me that I would see people walking around my house, but not to worry, it was the police scoping out the perimeter. She then tells me that they cannot find any signals of forced entry or suspicious activity, so go ahead and to go to the front door where the police would there assist me further. Upon leaving my room, not only was there no one in sight, but the remote control, all 4 of my dogs had just seen being shoved underneath the door, was on the coffee table in the living room, right where I'd left it. I get to the front door where at least half a dozen police officers are surrounding my house with their SWAT-style rifles, complete with canine units. They offered me to walk through the house. Once again, they said there was no signs of forced entry or suspicious activity. Nothing that would lead them to think that anyone was ever there. I have no idea of what would have transpired had my bedroom door been unlocked, and I'm not sure I'd even want to know. To this day, I still have no idea who or what had against remote controls. To my knowledge, nothing like that has happened again since. I'm a 23-year-old male. I was very young when this took place. It is one of my earliest memories. It is still very clear and vivid. Even 18 years later, I was living with my mother at the time. My parents had me young. My mum was 16 and her father 3 years her senior. My dad was more comfortable paying child support than helping raise me. So with no reliable babysitter, my early years were spent on the heels of my mother, doing all the dumb stuff adults do. My mother is also a Wiccan and claims to be a white witch, so unexplained things tend to occur within her presence. I have some crazy memories regarding that as well, but I digress. My mother and I were living with her future ex-husband at the time, Sheldon. We lived in a fifth-wheeler trailer in a local RV park in Central California. My mother and Sheldon were huge stoners, with weed being illegal back in the early 2000s. They constantly had to find hidden places to indulge themselves. We also had elderly neighbors who would regularly complain to the park owners and call the police about the smell. So smoking in our fifth wheel was obviously a risk and rarely occurred. And now that you have that information, onto the experience. It was later in the evening. I remember my mother's friend/dealer was over at the time. The 3 adults were in the back bedroom chatting and such. I was on the living room floor in front of our small TV, oblivious to the world around me. When my mother's friend was over, it usually meant one thing. We would be leaving to walk to some random place so they could smoke without fear of nosy neighbors or police. I didn't usually mind. I would just play with my big yellow Tonka trunk, being as loud as I could. Sometime later they came out of the back room. My mother mentioned aloud that she wanted to go smoke. The other 2 agreed, and before I knew it, I was out the door, upset I didn't get to finish my episode of Scooby-Doo. Construction of a new neighborhood filled with duplex homes was being built down our street. They were in the, what I like to call, skeletal stage of construction. All the rooms, floors and walls and roof were done. All the homes still had the salt and pepper pattern of dark light and darker tan wood. It made them, in my eyes, look like skeleton houses. Anyway, they decided this would be the perfect place to light up a few joints. We made our way into one of the first houses on the newly paved road, with no door or windows yet installed, making getting into the house very easy. When you walk in, you're met with a staircase leading to the second floor. To the left and right of the staircase, there were 2 arch-style doorways leading into the kitchen and dining rooms. At the top of the staircase were 3 hallways, 2 going left and right, and one bigger one in the center. There was a large window hole in the back of the larger hallway. I could see the beautiful sky from it. It was dark and colorful, and this detail will be important for later. The 3 of them went upstairs and down the right hallway into one of the bedrooms. My mother told me she'd be right back and that I needed to stay right where I was at the bottom of the staircase to play with my Tonka. I agreed, too busy to care as I was already getting sawdust in the back of my Tonka. At this point, dusk had hit. There was still enough light to see, but not enough for me to comfortably venture off and gather more sawdust. Content with my already overflowing pile of dust, I sat down and started making all the loud beeping noises consistent with a 5-year-old Tonka truck. I can't remember how much time had passed, but I suddenly heard a scratching noise coming from the left archway. Scared of everything that my 5-year-old mind could conjure up to explain the noise, I stayed out, pretending not to hear the increasingly louder scratching. I just increased my beeping noises to overpower the scratching, and after some time the scratching stopped. Suddenly, a small piece of wood started tumbling down the stairs. Reluctantly, I slowly turned my head to the top of the stairs, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this moment. At the top of the stairs was a very dark mass. When I say dark, I mean dark enough to completely block my view of the large window hole mentioned earlier. It had large, red, piercing eyes. The eyes remind me of the Reaper character from the cover of the Disturbed album 10,000 Fists, if anyone is familiar. The creature was very tall and wide. It didn't do anything but just stand there, and I remember being frozen in place, unable to make a single sound. And that's when I went unconscious. Luckily, I think this is what saved me. My mother said when recalling the experience, she didn't hear my loud truck driver noises and went to check on me. She exclaimed she witnessed me unconscious on the floor with this creature descending the staircase towards me. She yelled aloud, "You have no power here. Leave now," and it vanished into thin air. I woke up next morning at home in bed. Sheldon and the friends didn't witness the encounter and didn't believe our claims, but that didn't matter to us. We knew the truth. That experience bonded us, and I think it helped bond our relationship into what it is today. My mum truly is my best friend. I still don't know exactly what the creature was or why it showed up when it did. My mother and I just call it Phantom. I never saw it again, but its impact is still lasting on me. I have nightmares occasionally, reminding me that there could always be something sinister lurking in the shadows. I grew up in a neighborhood deep in the woods in an area full of cults and forgotten graveyards. When I was 8, there was a series of thunderstorms that caused our electricity to go out for a few days. Every night, the lightning and thunder and the wind howling would terrify me, and I would run crying to my parents' room and beg them to let me sleep in their room. One night, I woke up to a lady's voice calling my name. I sat up, realizing I could hear the thunder again, and thinking my mum had come to get me. Instead, the warm glow of soft candlelight flicked on the walls of my room. A beautiful woman stood in my doorway. She was wearing an old-fashioned white nightgown that looked to be from the early 1900s and was holding a candle with one hand cupped protectively around the flame to keep the wind from blowing it out. She had long, curly dark hair, deep brown eyes, and looked to be of Native American descent. At first I thought it was my mum wearing strange clothes, but then she called my name again, and it wasn't my mother's voice. "Are you afraid of the thunder?" she asked. I was not afraid, although she was a stranger, her presence was soothing, but at that moment the thunder roared and I was scared again. "Don't be afraid," she told me, smiling. "There's nothing to be afraid of." Lightning flashed and I woke up suddenly from the dream and found myself sitting upright. My mum was standing in the darkness where the lady had stood. "Get up, I've been calling your name for the last 5 minutes. You can't sleep in my room." "Where's the lady?" I asked her, wondering if I was still in a dream. It had felt so real. "What lady?" "The lady in white." My mum only stared at me for a moment, then turned and went back to her room. I haven't mentioned the lady who visited me to anyone since, but I have always wondered who she was. Was she an angel or a ghost? A dream or a vision? I guess I'll never know. This story starts a while ago when I was 5. So just to give you an idea, you would open my door and on the right is my dresser, and then to the far right is my bunk bed and a window, and then on the left is my TV and a closet. I slept in my bunk every night. However, I would wake up every night to see a body part or something akin in my bed. My dad has a very strong haunting on his side of the family. My parents and I kind of wrote it off as just little kids' nightmares, since my mum doesn't really believe in spirits. Fast forward till I was 7, and I was still having these nightmares. Then I started having nightmares about a girl in the corner of my room. She was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. She had long dark hair, wore a pretty white floral dress, and I started seeing her in real life, but only little glimpses from the corner of my eye. It was really creepy, as you may guess. I was old enough to understand that wasn't a real person in my bedroom, so I started to see her get worse and worse looking every night, and she would start walking over to my bed, but I could only see her head since I was on the top bunk. She would lay beneath me in the bottom bunk, which was a little play area at the time, until I fell asleep. I got brave one night and decided to ask her what her name was and why she was here. All she said was that she was called Elizabeth. She stopped coming for a while and then stopped coming at all. Fast forward to when I was 9, I started to have really bad sleep paralysis nightly. It eventually went away, and now I get it every few weeks. When I was 11, we moved to Virginia. I lived in Texas previously, and as soon as I got there, I decided to explore around, so I did. I saw a river and pond and some other stuff, but then I saw a small forest that was a small area of loads of trees. I walked into the trees and found some graves which creeped me out since they were obviously abandoned. I was reading along all of the names and I found one, Elizabeth. That's when I turned and bolted back home. After that, I would wake up and hear her in my room again. She looked so awful this time. She appeared to be burnt, her hair frizzled, and basically looked like she'd just come out of a fire. I started waking up a few minutes earlier than when Elizabeth came, and another girl with blonde hair and flowy, light yellow dress would sit on my bed and tell Elizabeth to leave. Once she came, Elizabeth would scream and go. I was only 11 and this scared me badly. I would cry and the girl would always tell me her name was Lillian. I know this sounds fake, but it's absolutely true. Elizabeth eventually left and I started having more dreams about a little girl, pulling me out of the bed and making me laugh, taking me outside. I would always pull away and run back to my bed. After that, I got super into spiritual things and saged my room. These dreams ended, and I found a few weeks later the people who were buried there died in a fire. I still see her in public or crowded spaces from time to time, but for now she's gone. I'm not sure what happened to Lillian as I haven't seen her since. I once had a very odd interaction with a phantom. I was 11 and sleeping on a cot in my mum's room near the foot of her bed. Really late into the night, I felt like someone was trying really hard to wake me up. I opened my eyes to see this old woman sitting on the floor with her arms crossed and rested on my cot, and her chin rested on her arms. This meant her face was only half a foot from mine. I remember she had dark colored hair that was almost a bluish black, and it was cut short and styled into those feathered curls I've seen a lot of old women wear. My jaw dropped and I immediately scooted as far away from her as possible. And just as I started sucking in the air to scream, she interrupts me and says, "Now don't scream. I have been to every person in the house, and you're the only one who can see me." She scolded me in such a normal way that I sort of calmed down. This whole time I didn't think I was completely awake. I think I was just half asleep, and that's why I was just accepting everything that was happening to me like it was normal. I think I asked her what she wanted or why she woke me up, and she said she needed her damn papers. She kept implying that this was her house and she can't find her paperwork to give to her kids. I tried telling her I can't find her stuff. All of our stuff was here now, but she scolded me again and made me get up and look. So I went out into the dining room, turned on all the lights and started going through my mum's important paper drawers to find her stuff. I can remember her getting confused and saying she didn't recognize any of our furniture, and I yelled at her, "Of course you don't, because this isn't your stuff, it's ours," and tried to tell her it's our house now and that her papers wouldn't be here. I still remember her face as she looked down really sad and confused. When I yelled, I must have woken up my mum because she came out and asked what I was doing, and the lady vanished. I angrily told my mum some woman got me out of bed because she wants her papers. I never saw her again, and no one else in my family said they saw or heard anything other than me walking around and looking for stuff. I lived in Kensington, a part of Philadelphia that has the largest open heroin market, and so it looks like The Walking Dead with drug addicts slugging around everywhere. It wasn't uncommon seeing some of them go into the back alleyway to shoot up. We could see this from our bedroom window. I was 4 or 5 the first time I saw something out of the ordinary. I remember it clear as day. My siblings and I were playing in the middle bedroom, having a good time being kids. My mum has just introduced us to her new boyfriend at the time, and they came upstairs and watched us from the hall. I don't know what happened, but during our fun I got the feeling of being watched, and I just had to turn in that direction, which happened to be the one window in the middle bedroom. I looked out and first saw what appeared to be a man, but then when I examined it closer, I noticed he didn't have a face, and his skin from his head to toe had a texture of a wrinkled plastic bag. I remember it reflecting the orange glow of the streetlight and being scared. I was staring a good 20 to 30 seconds and quickly turned to my mum, who was standing at the door, and said there's someone waiting for us. But when she rushed to the window, it was gone. Fast forward many events later. I'm on the couch watching Disney Channel. It was an ordinary day. I waited all day to watch this movie, so I sat downstairs alone so that I could do that, which was rare for me, as I was always afraid at this point in life. I would see shadow people regularly. Another paranormal phenomenon would happen. But I felt pretty good besides my siblings, and they didn't seem interested in the movie. Now, like I said, everything was going well when about halfway through this movie, I see out of the corner of my eye someone step up to the doorway of our kitchen. I turn up and see a figure standing there. It looks like a man. The only difference is he's as white as snow, his skin and clothes as white as a blank sheet of paper, but his eyes were dark like the void. I didn't scream or run away after witnessing this person or thing just appear in our kitchen doorway. I just stared at it, with it staring back at me. So I slowly got up and made my way upstairs to where my siblings were trying to explain to my older brother that I saw something downstairs. The creepy thing is, he, or it, didn't move from his spot, even as it slowly left my view, and I went up the stairs. I also did not feel any negative energy or malevolent energy from it. It was just startling, seeing an all-white man standing there. I was used to shadow people and other stuff. So my question is, has anyone else ever encountered a pale white person with black eyes? Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. As I said at the start of the video, if you've had an embarrassing story, a poop story, that you would like to share, it might be hilarious, it might be super embarrassing, but if you want the catharsis, I'm sure it helps sharing it with thousands of online strangers. Feel free to send it over to me. I'm sure everyone will get a good laugh out of it. I got a really good poop story that I was allowed to use about 6 months ago, and I've just been sitting on this golden brown egg for a long time. I found the story incredibly hilarious, and given that this situation isn't really getting much better in the world, I thought now might be the time to drop some brown truth nuggets on you all with these hilarious stories. Okay, the puns are getting a bit old. Anyway, send them over if you've got them. As always, a huge thanks to my amazing patrons whose names are on screen. If you'd like to donate a little bit every month, feel free. It really does help me out. And yeah, just a huge thanks for everyone who's listened to me this far. well done. But for now it's time to say goodbye. Well, to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.